When I first accepted the role of DOP on the film I Promise, I had my doubts about creating a World War II film based on the home front involving a woman with dementia. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised this film had the potential to be something completely different from any other war film. Truthfully, when exploring these other war films, I discovered so many amazing concepts and ideas to do with their cinematography that I wanted to adapt and recreate within our film. Looking back to the research phase of this project, I would say that I took inspiration from two main films in particular, the first being Dunkirk and the second being Darkest Hour, two World War II films that are equally different but both aesthetically stunning for a modern day war film. My two main aims as DOP on the film I Promise were to create both aesthetically stunning visuals but to also achieve naturalistic filming throughout. For me, once you've got the vision in your head and both you and your director agree on said vision, there's absolutely no stopping you from there. I would say that the current question at hand is, what do I need to do as a DOP to improve the narrative of the film I Promise? The film I Promise follows an elderly woman called Maggie who lives in the Welsh countryside. At the start of the film, she takes in a lost young boy called Teddy who is looking for his mother, and she tries to keep him safe during the turbulent time that is the Second World War. Towards the end of the film, we actually discover that Maggie is suffering with dementia. When asked about where the original idea came from, our scriptwriter Katrina's question to herself was,
what story can we write that doesn't take place in the UK in 2020, So we eventually came up with World War II.
From here, the focus of her vision became
familial relationships, because I think they're really rich and interesting to watch and to write about.
This then became her focus when designing the two main characters, Maggie and Teddy. And the narrative allows the audience to witness the two of them finding a new sense of family within each other. The other narrative focus is the underlying mental problem that Maggie faces in the form of dementia. During the writing of the script, Katrina researched a variety of different types of dementia, and it was at this stage decided that Maggie would suffer from dementia with Lewy bodies. According to the NHS website, people who suffer from dementia with Lewy bodies suffer symptoms such as hallucinations, including seeing, hearing, or smelling things that are not there. The concept of Maggie having this form of dementia has opened up a lot of possibilities for me as a DOP in order to create unconventional visuals that will reflect her mental state. As a team, we took inspiration from the critically acclaimed television show Friday Night Lights. We were all fortunate enough to speak to Lawan Stevens, who played a character with dementia within the show. She told us that when shooting, there was a lot of focus on repeating of actions both verbally and physically. When exploring scenes within the show, I was inspired by the choices made by director Peter Berg and DOP David Boyd in terms of the composition and attention to detail within each of the shots. From watching Friday Night Lights and having spoken to Lawan personally, I intend to use the repeated action technique combined with close-up shots and carefully crafted lighting in order to create empathy for our protagonist Maggie within I Promise. During the research phase of this project, I took to finding inspiration by extensively internet searching war cinematography, as well as watching war films myself until I knew exactly what my individual vision was to be. At the end of the research phase, and once I had created my own lookbook for visuals, I came to the conclusion that the main film I am taking inspiration from is Darkest Hour. I will use this film to discuss how I intend to adapt their techniques for my own shots in order to aid the narrative. So, just for context, Darkest Hour was released in 2017, and it focuses on the time at home during World War II, specifically looking at Winston Churchill and his role during the war. As you can see from the images I took inspiration from, there is a significant use of natural lighting for the daytime scenes, dependent also on the lens choice. I can see that the DOP has chosen to overexpose the lens, flooding the scene to overemphasize daylight. As well as this, I can see that the DOP has used subject-specific lighting for the darker shots, focusing on the shadows, which I will go into a bit more detail on shortly. I intend to adapt these two techniques and create similar shots within I Promise. I came across an interview with the DOP of Darkest Hour, Bruno Del Bernal. When asked about his artistic vision for the film, as well as the opinions of the director, he said,
So it was a starting point of our conversation about the whole aesthetic of this movie. So it was basically based on Churchill's character more than the actual events.
What I understood from this was that they focused a lot of their creative decisions on Churchill's character, and they lit and framed him in a certain way so as to paint a better picture of what his character meant to the story. Thus, having a more believable character improves the audience's belief of the narrative. So, from here, my intention for our film became clear. I must focus on our main protagonist Maggie, as she is the one that will be driving the narrative forward. So I could use the lighting to manipulate and connote her changes within her key problem within the film, which is dementia. For example, at the start of the film, allowing as much light into the shots as possible, making the room appear wide open, giving Maggie the space that she needs to deal with the young refugee that has appeared at her doorstep. Later down the line of the narrative, the lighting will become very subject specific, up until the end of the film where the composition will become very tight on Maggie. This will hopefully build up tension and convey the changes in her dementia. To give an example of a scene, the DOP of Darkest Hour said that he purposefully made it so that Gary Oldman was directly in the spotlight, as to connote the fact that there is no way he can escape. I intend to recreate something like this within the scene of Maggie at the end of the film where she drops the memory box. Now, this offers an enclosed space where she comes to the realisation that her son is dead and that the young refugee Teddy isn't actually real. This spotlight effect will make the audience notice the realisation that Maggie has had. During a meeting with my director, I discussed this concept to him, and we both believe that this lighting plot will drive the narrative forward creatively. They said they used a spotlight within Darkest Hour to make it look like he had nowhere to escape, and that's kind of how Maggie will feel with her dementia, so...
Yeah, it sounds good. I like the idea of like closing in on her.
In terms of relating this to my work, I would like to look at the floor and lighting plans that I originally drew up. As stated in these floor plans, as well as the original equipment list that I drew up, when shooting I intend to use a combination of natural daylight entering into the shots via the windows, combined with artificial lighting coming from a set of Dido lights and studio panel lighting. We will also be using the Zine lens kit for the shoot. Now, in terms of looking at an example from our film, in scene 3, the audience is given their first look at Maggie and her key characteristics. This is just before she takes in the lost young boy. The main shot type within this scene will be long shots. In order to achieve this, I will be using the 24 and 35mm lenses. I also intend to explore stepping up the T-stops to let in extra daylights from the windows, here, 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 and here. By doing this, I am giving the audience the chance to explore Maggie and her surroundings in a bright and vivid setting before they actually know that she is experiencing problems with dementia. However, when we jump to scene 18, the film's final scene, Maggie is flustered exploring items in a memory box. It is here she comes to the realisation that she was imagining the boy that was in her house, and the audience see the effects of her dementia take full force. Within this scene, I intend to use a combination of the 50 and the 85mm lenses. By using these lenses, it will give a tighter composition throughout. I will also be combining this with subject-specific lighting, as shown here. It will create a trapped effect for Maggie, suggesting that she cannot outrun the effects of her dementia, and the audience will witness very closely her remembering that her son died during the war. Although the bulk of I Promise is filmed indoors, there are some scenes that take place externally. What I aim to create within the narrative is that whilst outside, she is still experiencing this effect of being trapped, but this time in a hallucinatory state. I intend to do this via the use of high, low, and Dutch tilted angles. In terms of understanding these shots, this part of the narrative is portrayed entirely inside of Maggie's mind, whereby she feels like she is stuck in the middle of a battlefield. By using a multitude of shots, all taken at alternate angles, it offers the audience a snapshot of Maggie's warped experiences, overemphasising the fact that this is a hallucination. At this point, colour will play a large role in the aiding of the narrative, in the sense that it will help the audience tell the difference between the story's reality and Maggie's hallucinatory battle sequences. The real-world colours will focus on creams, beiges, whites and browns, whereas the battle sequences will be overly indulged in slightly unnatural greens and blues in order to steer away from the naturalism. In terms of wrapping this up, we must go back to the original question. To summarise this, I have split the question up into 3 main points. So my choice is that I'll work with the lighting and composition, showing progression from the start to the end of the film, moving from more open spaces and high exposure lighting to tighter shots and subject-specific lighting. How this aids the narrative. It suggests Maggie's decline in mental state due to her increasing problems with dementia. What this means for the audience. The audience will hopefully link the lighting motivations to Maggie's character, who is in turn driving the narrative forward. By carrying out the choices that I have discussed within this video, I believe that I have what it takes as a DOP to successfully drive forward the narrative of the film, I promise. My team and I are determined to tell the story of I Promise, but only when it is safe to do so.